If Carlos is offered the CEO position, will he accept it or not? And if you met someone like Carlos in your life, would you feel blessed? Let's find out. The Unexpected Mentor Part 2. Later that afternoon, his assistant knocked on his door. "Carlos, there's someone here to see you. They said they've heard a lot about you and wanted to meet you personally." Curious, Carlos stood up and walked to the reception area. Standing, there was a man in his early 30s with an air of confidence, but also humility. He extended his hand to Carlos. "Hi, my name is Mark. I've been following your career for a while, and I just wanted to meet you in person. You've inspired me with your approach to leadership, and I'm hoping to learn from you." Carlos smiled, shaking his hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mark. I'm flattered that you followed my work. Why don't we sit down and talk?" They sat in Carlos's office, and Mark explained how he had recently started his own business but was struggling with the overwhelming pressure and responsibility that came with leadership. He felt there were a weight of decisions in managing people, and despite his early successes, he was starting to burn out. "I've been reading about how you balance work and life, how you mentor others, and I want to learn how to do that for myself and my team," Mark said. Carlos listened carefully, understanding all too well the pressure that came with success. He had once been in Mark's shoes, feeling like the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. Carlos began to share with Mark the same wisdom that Mr. Johnny had imparted to him years ago. He talked about the importance of balance, of not letting work consume you, and of learning to prioritize what really matters. "One of the biggest lessons I learned," Carlos said, "is that you can't do everything alone. You need to trust your team, delegate, and give them the space to grow. And you need to take care of yourself, too. Burnout doesn't help anyone. Not you, not your business, not your team." Mark nodded, absorbing every word. "I've been trying to do it all myself," he admitted. "I feel like if I let go of control, things will fall apart." Carlos smiled. "I used to feel the same way, but trust me, by empowering your team and giving yourself time to rest, you'll actually see better results. It's not about doing more. It's about doing the right things." They talked for over an hour, with Carlos sharing more practical tips and advice on leadership, time management, and self-care. By the end of their conversation, Mark looked visibly more relaxed, his initial tension eased by the guidance he had received. "Thank you, Carlos," Mark said sincerely. "This has been incredibly helpful. I've learned more from you in an hour than I have in months of reading books and attending seminars." Carlos smiled warmly. "I'm glad I could help. Remember, leadership is a journey. You'll make mistakes along the way, but that's part of the process. Just keep learning and growing." After Mark left, Carlos felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He realized that his influence was growing beyond his immediate team and company. People were seeking him out for advice and guidance, just as he had once sought out Mr. Johnny. The ripple effect was continuing, spreading wider, and touching more lives than he had ever imagined. Weeks passed, and Carlos received an email from Mark. It was a heartfelt message thanking him for the advice and sharing how things had improved in his business. Mark had taken Carlos's advice to heart, and not only was he feeling more balanced, but his team was thriving as well. Carlos smiled as he read the email. It was yet another reminder of the power of mentorship, of passing on the wisdom that had been given to him. He replied with encouragement, reminding Mark to stay focused on what mattered most and to always keep learning. As time went on, Carlos continued to mentor others, sharing the lessons he had learned throughout his career. His reputation as a thoughtful, balanced leader grew, and he was often invited to speak at conferences and events. He enjoyed these opportunities to reach even more people, to pass on the wisdom that had been so generously given to him. One day, after a particularly inspiring conference, Carlos received an unexpected phone call. It was Mr. Johnny. His voice, though older, still carried the same warmth and wisdom that had changed Carlos's life all those years ago. "I've been hearing a lot about you lately, Carlos," Mr. Johnny said. "It sounds like you've been busy helping a lot of people." Carlos chuckled. "I've just been passing on what you taught me. I owe so much of my success to you." Mr. Johnny's voice softened. "You were always meant for great things, Carlos. I'm proud of you, but remember, the journey never ends. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep helping others. That's the real legacy." Carlos felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you, Mr. Johnny. Your wisdom has touched more lives than you know." They talked for a while longer, catching up on life and reminiscing about the old days. When the call ended, Carlos felt a deep sense of gratitude. He realized that everything he had achieved, every person he had helped, was part of a much larger story, one that had started with Mr. Johnny's simple yet profound advice. Carlos knew that his journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges, new people to mentor, and new lessons to learn. But he was ready for it all, armed with the wisdom he had gained and the understanding that true success wasn't about personal achievement. It was about the impact you had on others. As he looked out of his office window, watching the city below, Carlos felt a sense of peace. He had come full circle from a young man struggling to find his way to a mentor helping others navigate their own paths. And through it all, he had learned the most valuable lesson of all. The real legacy we leave behind is the wisdom we share and the lives we touch. With that thought in mind, Carlos turned back to his desk, ready for whatever came next. The future was bright, and he was excited to see where the journey would take him. And as he prepared for the next chapter of his life, he knew one thing for sure: he would continue to pass on the wisdom that had changed his life, ensuring that the ripple effect of kindness, or balance, and mentorship would continue for generations to come. Carlos felt a renewed sense of purpose as he continued his work. But something inside him shifted that day. His role wasn't just about achieving personal success anymore. He realized his legacy was not in the accolades or the positions he held, but in the people he had helped, the lives he had touched, and the wisdom he had passed on. A few months later, Carlos received an unexpected offer from his friend company. The board had been impressed with his leadership and the way he had developed the people around him. They offered him a new position, Chief Executive Officer. It was the pinnacle of his career, the ultimate acknowledgement of his hard work and dedication. But as Carlos sat in the boardroom listening to the offer, he felt conflicted. The younger version of him would have jumped at the opportunity without a second thought. But now, with all the wisdom he had gained, he wasn't so sure. He knew that taking on the CEO role would come with more responsibilities, more pressure, and less time to focus on mentoring others. He asked for a few days to think it over, and the board agreed. That evening, Carlos returned home and sat quietly in his living room, thinking about his next move. He had achieved so much in his career, and the offer was a dream for many. But something inside him hesitated. Did he want to climb even higher, or was his true calling elsewhere? He reached for his phone and dialed Mr. Johnny's number. When the familiar voice answered, Carlos felt a sense of calm. Huh. I have a big decision to make, Carlos said, explaining the offer. I should be excited, but I'm not sure if this is what I really want. Mr. Johnny listened patiently and then said, Carlos, you've always been ambitious, and that served you well. But remember, success isn't always about reaching the top. It's about knowing what fulfills you, what makes you happy, and how you can continue to make a difference. Carlos let the words sink in. So you think I shouldn't take the job? I think you need to follow your heart, Mr. Johnny replied. If this role will help you grow and continue to help others, then take it. But if it's going to pull you away from what truly matters to you, it's okay to say no. You've already made a lasting impact, and you'll keep making one, no matter your title. The next day, Carlos went for a long walk, clearing his mind and thinking deeply about his future. He thought about the people he had mentored, the lessons he had learned, and the life he wanted to lead moving forward. The CEO role would bring more power, more visibility, and more challenges. But it would also take him away from the hands-on mentoring that had become his passion. By the time he returned home, Carlos knew what he had to do. He walked into the boardroom the following morning, and after thanking the board for their generous offer, he respectfully declined the CEO position. He explained that his true passion lay in helping people grow, and that taking on more executive duties would pull him away from the work he loved most. The board members were surprised but respected his decision. They admired his dedication to developing others, and they understood that Carlos had found his purpose beyond climbing the corporate ladder. With the weight of that decision off his shoulders, Carlos felt a renewed sense of energy. He knew he had made the right choice. While he would continue to lead within the company, his focus would remain on mentorship and personal development. And now, without the added pressure of executive responsibilities, he had more time to dedicate to his passion. In the following months, Carlos started a leadership development program within the company. He worked with younger employees, helping them find balance in their careers and guiding them through the same challenges he had faced. He created workshops on work-life balance, emotional intelligence, and leadership skills, ensuring that every person had the tools they needed to succeed, not just professionally, but personally. The program became a huge success, with employees from all levels of the company joining. Carlos watched with pride as his mentees grew in confidence, found their own paths, and began mentoring others in turn. One evening, as Carlos was leaving the office, he received an email from someone unexpected. It was from Mark, the entrepreneur he had met months ago. The email was long, filled with gratitude and stories of how Carlos's advice had transformed his business and his leadership style. But what touched Carlos the most was the final line of the email. I've started mentoring others in my company, just as you mentored me. Thank you for helping me see what's truly important. Carlos sat back in his chair, reading the line over and over again. The ripple effect was continuing to grow. Just as Mr. Johnny's wisdom had passed through him, it was now passing through Mark and all the people he had touched. Carlos had become part of a legacy that extended far beyond his own life. Years passed, and Carlos's influence within the company and beyond only grew. He became known not just for his leadership, but for his ability to connect with people, to guide them, and to help them find balance in their lives. He spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and mentored hundreds of people, each one carrying forward the lessons he had learned from Mr. Johnny. But despite his growing influence, Carlos remained grounded. He never forgot the man who had changed his life with simple advice. and he never stopped passing on that wisdom. One day, as Carlos was packing up his office to head home, his phone rang. It was Mr. Johnny's daughter. Carlos's heart sank as he heard the news. Mr. Johnny had passed away peacefully in his sleep. He had lived a long, full life, and he had touched countless lives with his wisdom and kindness. Carlos attended the funeral, standing alongside the many people whose lives Mr. Johnny had influenced. As he listened to the eulogies, he realized that the legacy Mr. Johnny had left behind wasn't in the positions he had held or the wealth he had accumulated. It was in the people he had helped, the wisdom he had shared, and the lives he had changed. After the funeral, Carlos returned home, feeling a deep sense of loss, but also immense gratitude. Mr. Johnny had given him so much more than career advice. He had given him the tools to live a meaningful life. And now it was Carlos's turn to continue that legacy. He sat at his desk and began writing a letter, not to anyone in particular, but to future generations of leaders, mentors, and dreamers. In it, he shared the lessons he had learned, the importance of balance, and the value of helping others. He wanted his words to reach far beyond his lifetime, just as Mr. Johnny's wisdom had reached him. As Carlos wrote, he realized that the greatest legacy he could leave wasn't in his own name or his own accomplishments. It was in the ripple effect of kindness, wisdom, and mentorship that would continue long after he was gone. And with that thought, Carlos smiled, knowing that the journey wasn't over. There were still many more lives to touch, many more lessons to pass on, and many more ripples to create. Because in the end, success wasn't about climbing higher. It was about lifting others as you climbed. The story ends here.
If you're interested in hearing the beautiful story of a woman who struggled to find love and how she finally met her life partner, click the video here or follow the link in the description.